Hello, today we will present the PRIM Mining Impact Reduction Plan on Biodiversity and Speleological Heritage. The high number of Brazilian fauna and flora species at risk of extinction, and the increasing vulnerabilities to which the Brazilian speleological heritage is susceptible to, highlight the importance and legitimacy of establishing goals and strategies for the protection, conservation, and recovery of both biodiversity and geodiversity. The pressures that mining exerts on ecosystems are increasing, raising the vulnerability of species and habitats, and makes it extremely relevant to find more sustainable alternatives for the development and expansion of such activities. In this context, ICMBio, the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, collaboratively develops the impact reduction plans for biodiversity, such as the PRIM mining. The PRIMs are based on the logical concept that environmental impacts are reduced hierarchically, prioritizing actions that prevent the threat from amplifying its impact, followed by actions that mitigate their damage, and lastly, actions that compensate for non-mitigable residual damage, thus guiding economic growth without a net loss of biodiversity, that is, without species extinction and loss of habitat. PRIM mining is an innovative tool generated from the overlap of maps of biodiversity sensitivity and impact exposure, resulting in a compatibility map between biodiversity conservation and mining sector activities. The sensitivity map allows us to recognize where there is greater or lesser biodiversity sensitivity among the areas considered relevant for mining. For its construction, we relied on the expertise of ICMBio's national research centers and the various collaborators, and by following pre-established criteria that identify species of fauna, flora, unique environments, and ecosystem services considered sensitive to the impacts of mining. We use systematic conservation planning tools and concepts such as complementarity, representativeness, efficiency, irreplaceability, and vulnerability to generate the information behind the sensitivity of biodiversity. Another stage of the PRIM's construction is the development of the impact exposure map, in which the main impacts of mining that can be spatialized, such as habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation, are estimated. Compatibility map divides itself into a spatial gradient for implementing public policies related to the mining sector's permanent demands. The levels are grouped into 4 broader categories of compatibility. Areas with very low compatibility are the biodiversity regions most sensitive to threats and with more intact landscapes. New mining projects should be avoided in these areas, as they potentially present higher environmental costs. Regions framed as low compatibility are areas of biodiversity more sensitive to threats and that present less intact landscapes already altered by mining activities. In these areas, the environmental cost is also high, given the continued presence of sensitive species. Here, efforts to mitigate impacts should be intensified. Areas with high compatibility are regions of biodiversity less sensitive to threats and with more intact landscape. These are areas of less concern for the conservation of sensitive biodiversity and so present lower environmental costs. Sites with very high compatibility are areas of biodiversity less sensitive to threats and with less intact landscapes. These present the least environmental costs, making them the most suitable for investment in new project ventures. Therefore, the greater the compatibility, the lower the environmental cost will be. In this way, the compatibility map supports environmental management by identifying more compatible scenarios between the expansion of mining project ventures and conservation, guiding decision-making in favor of the best locational choice, and in defining the mitigation and compensatory actions needed to reduce impacts on biodiversity and geodiversity. These decisions align themselves with a more sustainable development with greater impact reduction and a more agile, less complex, and less onerous environmental licensing process. In addition to the compatibility map, the PRIM also includes a map for environmental compensation that can help direct impact reduction efforts towards areas with greater similarity in their composition of conservation type, providing greater effectiveness through compensatory measures. To access all the PRIM content and materials, visit the ICMBio webpage and search for Impact Reduction Plan. Or, better understand how to use the tool, visit our page on Facebook. If you have questions, suggestions, or comments, please reach us via email.